In January of 1994, as a shocked nation watches, beautiful, talented figure skater Nancy Kerrigan is brutally attacked at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, ending her bid as the odds-on favorite to claim the gold medal.
It's just such a tragedy.
Life as she knew it is over.
When the mysterious assailant makes a clean getaway, all fingers point to a talented young competitor.
It's horrible, and our prayers with her and her family, and I just hope she recovers soon.
When you're continually compared to someone else, it can get to you.
A competitor whose traumatic upbringing in a trailer park and years of spousal abuse taught her the harsh rules of survival.
She was tough, wrong side of the tracks, nothing given to her.
Ugh, I just wish skating was a sport and not a beauty pageant.
But was this poor country girl really the mastermind behind such a vicious and unprecedented attack?
What if any of this was true?
We had a lot of good evidence against Tonya Harding. That doesn't make it airtight, though.
Or was she an innocent scapegoat, unfairly maligned by the media and demonized by fans?
By the age of 23, Tonya had lost everything that she'd ever worked for.
How would a single act send the life of a promising athlete spiraling into the dark world of sex tapes and tabloid smears?
Can you imagine being in a place where you're thinking, for the right price, yeah, sure.
Respect and money and a gold medal, they're all on the line.
What on earth is going on here?
It was a circus in this town, believe me. It was ridiculous.
It was the talk of the games, good versus evil.
Meet Tonya Harding.
You are full of surprises.
Just a second-class citizen in the glitzy, high-stakes world of figure skating, until scandal made her famous. The whack heard round the world has remained one of the most scandalous events in the history of sports.
This case generated more interest by the media than any case I've ever seen.
Tonya Harding's story has all the elements of a Hollywood movie. A declining ice skater turns her ire on a beautiful competitor due to jealousy and desperation.
It was very strange. You couldn't have made some of it up. If you had, people would have accused you of being unrealistic.
Books and documentaries have been released in droves, and the parodies seem endless.
She was a joke, and it was of epic proportion.
And when Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan shared the ice for the first time since the attack, the world couldn't wait to see what would happen. It still remains one of the most watched broadcasts of all time.
This is the biggest story of the decade.
Tonya Harding was raised in small homes and little trailers in the sticks. She was really in the middle of nowhere near Portland.
We just aren't a city that you think of where scandal and crime occurs.
Tonya's background was very, I guess, lower middle class, blue collar. She would just tell self-deprecating jokes and say, that she was trailer trash.
Tonya says she was about 4 years old when she first spotted the sport that would change her life forever.
Tonya's mother agrees to enroll her in ice skating lessons, though they are more than the family can afford. Skating instructor Diane Rawlinson recognizes Tonya's abilities early on.
Tonya shows potential immediately, and before you know it, Coach Diane Rawlinson had taken her under her wing.
Hey, you show a lot of promise. Show me some more.
Tonya's mother is always around with a critical eye, while Coach Diane is a soft place to fall.
Yeah. Diane had taken her, nurtured her. She'd seen the talent that was there, and I think she believed in her.
One of her coaches says at the age of 5 that this is Olympic material. That stuff gets out.
She was stocky, she was strong, and she just had the ability to jump. She was a jumper.
While her relationship with her mother is strained, Tonya is a daddy's girl.
She absolutely adored her father. He had taught her to work on cars, taught her to hunt and fish. Her father treated her like a tomboy, basically, growing up.
God, she loved her dad. Her mom and they just clashed.
But Tonya's challenges don't end at home with her mom. She also begins to feel unaccepted by the ice skating community.
In the 80s and 90s, competitive skating was an expensive sport, and it also had a lot of elements of beauty pageants to it. And Tonya Harding was lacking in all areas.
Pretty little dresses, pretty little hair, all the pretty little things, and we didn't fit that mold. So that's what we were trying to do, was to kind of bring her around to be on the more feminine side. And she was one who really needed to work on her finished moves and the finesse and the polish, and that was my job.
But turning Tonya into a graceful beauty that skating insiders can embrace proves to be an uphill battle.
Unlike the other wealthy skaters, Tonya had to wear costumes that were made by her mother. So her mother was involved in her career, but it also gave her mom a level of control.
Tonya!
The performance of the evening, her technical content was there. She did land 6 triples.
You gonna watch them or be them?
You don't hear of any other figure skaters with that kind of background and that kind of story. Not in this country, you don't. Where everybody's the princess, you look a certain way, you talk a certain way, you behave a certain way, and Tonya never checked off any of those boxes. Ever.
Thought you wanted this.
I do, Mom.
See?
I do.
Well, then why don't you start acting like it?
Mom, it's okay.
Don't you tell me it's okay. Do you know how much these lessons cost? We cannot afford to squander our chances away. You understand? Come on.
The spankings, the hairbrushes used to swat, just always trying to sink any kind of momentum and spirit that this girl had.
After Tonya drops out of high school to concentrate on training, she meets a man who will alter the course of her life.
Jeff Galuli was this local Portland guy who worked in a warehouse.
So what's the thing you do that's so different?
You mean the triple Axel?
Yeah, what's so special about it?
No one has landed that trick. It's the single hardest and most valuable trick in ice skating.
Wait, what does that mean?
Endorsements.
And you can do it?
Yeah.
Wow, you are full of surprises.
Jeff was intrigued by Tonya and her skating abilities, and Tonya was smitten too.
Jeff often visits Tonya at practice, and their chemistry becomes undeniable.
When she met Jeff, she saw him as the opportunity to get away from her mom. And so she moved in with Jeff right away.
In 1990, at the age of 19, Tonya marries 22-year-old Jeff Galuli.
From the outside looking in, that was a very happy relationship.
Hey, just
Calm down. Don't tell me to calm down.
Why are you gonna push me
Don't
like that?
push me!
Hey, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
During the first year of their marriage, Tonya said that Jeff beat her repeatedly. So she went from one bad situation to worse.
Meanwhile, Tonya runs into an old acquaintance named Mike Pliska, who's working construction in the mall where Tonya practices.
Can't make it as pretty as you no matter what we try.
Tonya was still married to Jeff, but Mike became a friend and someone who she could trust and talk to.
She had confided in me that she was, that she was being abused, but insisted that I not do anything about it.
I hate you!
Things like grabbing hair, slapping, things that didn't necessarily leave a lot of marks.
Tonya and Jeff separate, and Tonya starts dating Mike, who is everything that bad boy Jeff is not.
So how does an athlete like you smoke?
It relaxes me.
No judgment.
When Tonya was dating Mike in 1991, she was at the top of her game.
In the late 80s, Tonya works her way up the competitive skating ladder and receives her first U.S. figure skating championship medal when she places third in 1989.
But there was this beautiful young skater named Nancy Kerrigan, who was fast becoming America's ice princess.
Nancy captivates judges and begins to give Tonya a run for her money.
Ice skating was different back then. It was more about femininity than power. And many people believed that the judging reflected that. And the lower the scores got, the bigger the chip on Tonya's shoulder grew.
Could you get more opposite than Tonya And Nancy? Tonya was this puppy that was just gonna say, hey, nice to meet you, let's talk. And obviously Kerrigan, the opposite of that, much more reserved, much more cautious, certainly not reckless, and wanted to be in a controlled situation. Her skating was certainly controlled, and that fit her well.
Because of the glaring differences in their backgrounds, the media pit Tonya and Nancy Kerrigan against each other as arch rivals. And Tonya starts believing the press.
Ugh, I just wish skating was a sport and not a beauty pageant.
You just focus on your sport and it'll all work out.
I'd love to stay focused on my sport, but I have to contend with ice princesses like Nancy.
When you're continually compared to someone else, it can get to you.
But at the 1991 U.S. Championships, Tonya Harding proves to the world that grace and femininity are no match for sheer athleticism.
Tonya Harding becomes the first woman to ever land a triple axel in competition. It became her signature move and gave her the respect and recognition that she'd been craving for her entire life.
She was very tough. She wanted to be the best and the first.
Every other skater in the country and in the world was aware of her ability to hit that triple axel and her guts to try it again and again in competition. Watch this, triple axel, boom. It was magnificent to witness.
Tonya Harding was in a really good place. She's skating better than ever, and she's dating a really nice guy.
But sudden success and notoriety whets Tanya's appetite for financial gain at the expense of her relationship with Mike Pliska.
She would get a lot of money from wealthy donors. A lot of these male donors wanted to take her out to dinner as part of that.
Mike claimed that Tonya would go on these dinner dates with wealthy donors, but Tonya said these were all innocent.
I would suggest to her, why don't you say he can take us both to dinner? I could see her maybe trying to hook up with one of those guys just to, she did think a lot about money. After a couple of arguments about those kind of dinners, I said, you know what, maybe it's just time we go our own ways.
So Mike and Tonya break up after a few months together, and wouldn't you know it, Jeff Galuli was waiting in the wings and the bad boy was back.
Tonya eventually resolves to give her relationship another try and reconciles with Galuli. But on the rink, her performance suffers. She fails to medal at the 1992 Olympics, while rival Nancy Kerrigan does.
Tonya had been the best skater in the world, but here comes Nancy Kerrigan, who's starting to beat her in competition, which meant less sponsors that an amateur like Tonya really desperately needed.
Tonya gains weight, starts smoking more, and is no longer landing her famous triple axel.
Why does she get all the endorsements and attention?
Hey, she ain't got nothing on you.
For Jeff Galuli, the endorsements, I think that had his eyes glazing over, and she bought into it.
November 1993, Portland, Oregon. It's the Olympic Regional Qualification event, where skaters in that region compete to get one step closer to the 1994 Olympic team. It's Tonya's home rink, and there is a large crowd.
Tonya was a local superstar, and people in her circle said that she was insulted, that she had to qualify for the Olympics just like everyone else. And some say she wasn't prepared.
What happens next will be the subject of controversy to this day, as it is suggested that Tonya herself may have come up with a way to avoid qualifying at a local level. During warm-ups, an anonymous man calls the rink and threatens Tonya's life.
The voice on the phone said that if Tonya took to the ice, a sniper would shoot her in the head. This was just months after Monica Seles had been stabbed on the court, so officials took this really seriously.
Officials end up canceling the competition, and Tonya is given an exemption, meaning she no longer has to qualify locally.
There were whispers that this call had come from somebody in Tonya's camp, but there wasn't any evidence to prove it.
Self-preservation was something she had a definite sense of, and so I could see her doing whatever it took.
So Jeff meets up with an old buddy, Sean Eckhart, and tells him about the potential windfall from the 1994 Olympics if Tonya wins. if she can only beat Nancy Kerrigan.
Because she's not Nancy Kerrigan, the judges hate her.
Sean Eckhart says he can give Tonya the leg up she needs.
Whatever we need to do, I'm ready.
He was sort of a grossly overweight kind of buffoon. He presented himself as being a security agent of some sort, but that was taking things far beyond reality.
I need to do something to Kerrigan to make sure Tonya gets what she deserves.
We should kill her.
What are you talking about? No. Sean, what a stupid idea, you idiot.
Oh, okay, maybe not kill her, but hurt her. I mean, that would guarantee Tonya qualifying for the Olympics. And that guarantees her a gold medal because she's the best. That's our ticket, you know?
And the seed of hurting Nancy Kerrigan was planted.
According to investigators, Jeff presents Tonya with the idea of disabling Nancy Kerrigan, her biggest competitor.
You want to be on the cover of a magazine, and you want the Wheaties box right there with your mug on it and that gold around your neck. That's what you want, Tonya. That's what you want. That's what you want. And she said, oh, okay, let's do it.
Jeff and Tonya knew that this was probably her last chance at Olympic gold and the money that they'd both get along with it.
What if we broke her femur?
So Jeff gave Sean Eckhart the okay to hire two of his bodybuilder friends to pull off an attack on Nancy Kerrigan.
We need a photograph, address, the ring she practices in.
I think it just seemed like a natural fit to recruit Mr. Eckhart or to pick his brain about how this assault might be undertaken and completed. And then he found Shane Stant and his uncle, Mr. Smith.
Now there are 4 men plus Tonya involved in the plot, and all have different motives ranging from endorsements to bodyguard contracts to larger payments after the attack. But first, they need to locate Nancy Kerrigan.
To find out where Nancy was training in Massachusetts, Tonya calls a skating journalist who would know, and the journalist calls her back.
It's Vera. Okay, so I found out she practices at Tony Kent Arena, but I can't get an address. I'm sorry, sweetie. Good luck.
What did she say?
Tuna Can Arena.
No. Play it again.
No, I really think she said Tuna Can Arena.
Play it again, Jeff.
Tonya writes down the location of Nancy Kerrigan's training rink on a piece of paper, mistakenly identifying the Tony Kent Arena as Toonie Can Arena.
Hi, Tonya. It's Vera. Okay, so I found out she practices at Tony Kent Arena, but I can't get an address.
Arena.
I'm sorry, sweetie. Good luck.
An expert will later testify that the notes are written in Tonya Harding's handwriting.
Tonya drives Jeff to Sean Eckart's World Bodyguard Services business,
Are you sure this is safe?
where he'll meet these other 2 guys and plan out the attack.
We can trust these guys.
Jeff takes the down payment to Sean Eckhart.
I'll call you right afterwards.
Certainly there wasn't very much money that was ever paid for these services. I think that was Mr. Eckhart's thought, that if he could create the atmosphere of fear, he could benefit from that and exploit it to his own advantage by becoming then a bodyguard and employing other bodyguards for the various skaters.
It's $2,000 there.
That should take care of all your expenses. You'll need to follow her home from her practice.
World Bodyguard Services was run out of Sean Eckart's parents' house, so the 4 men met in his bedroom to discuss what to do next.
We'll break her femur as discussed.
It's her right leg. I confirmed with Tonya, that's her leg.
Meanwhile, Sean Eckhart's father overhears details of the attack on more than one occasion.
I'm the man that solves other people's problems.
The plan was to whack Nancy at her home rink right before the last qualifying event for the Olympics. They want to make sure that Nancy is hurt enough that she can't compete in the 1994 Olympics, which is just weeks away.
Tony Kent Arena, can I help you?
Now that Tonya and Jeff know that Nancy trains at the Tony Kent Arena near Boston, one of them calls to find out what time Nancy will be practicing.
We found the phone records of the phones that were used in the Galuli Harding household, and we were able to piece together the efforts that had been undertaken right about the time the assault was going to occur.
She practices at 9:30 and 12:30.
The information on Nancy's whereabouts was relayed to Shane Stant, the hitman who was standing by in Boston. He's getting ready to perform the most unbelievable attack the sports world has ever seen.
I think Tonya Harding and Mr. Galuli thought if they could have Nancy Kerrigan removed from the Olympic competition, then Tonya Harding would win.
The plan was to club Nancy on her landing leg after she practiced at her home rink in Massachusetts.
But when he can't find Nancy at Tony Kent Arena, Shane Stant has only one more chance to get the job done.
So now it's on to Plan B. He has to go to Detroit and whack Nancy at the US Championships. There are places that are not at a televised national championship that you can do this. But I don't think they were smart enough to come up with that.
It's 3 days later, and the Olympic qualifying event in Detroit is about to commence. Tonya Harding has just flown in from Portland to compete, while Sean Eckhart and Jeff Galuli stay behind. Hitman Shane Stant has just arrived from Boston by bus.
The Olympics are about 6 weeks away, so this is the last chance that Tonya has to prevent Nancy from qualifying. The attack has to happen now, or Tonya believes that she'll have no shot at the gold and the financial windfall that will come along with it.
Shane Stant's uncle, Derek Smith, has joined him in Detroit. The two men go over the attack and how they'll get away.
Door and head out the double doors. I'll be outside waiting with the car. We go home. Wealthy men.
By disabling Tonya's chief competitor, they all believe they'll benefit financially in different ways.
Meanwhile, Tonya is in her hotel room in Detroit, and Jeff is across the country at home in Portland. Both are anxiously awaiting the news.
January 6th was a big day in the lives of all of them, and they were in constant communication with one another.
Nancy Kerrigan leaves the ice after a public practice session. The next day, she is to compete in the US Championships that will undoubtedly win her a spot on the Olympic team.
This is nuts. How is this happening?
The whole thing goes wrong. Shane Stant was supposed to hit Nancy's knee, but instead hits her lower thigh. And then, when he realizes the doors are locked, he has to dive through the window.
I don't think we could say this was a well-executed plan. I don't think a great deal of thought had gone into it.
Television cameras, coaches, and medical personnel rush to Nancy Kerrigan's side.
So after this whack heard around the world, Nancy crumples to the ground, sobbing hysterically and clutching her leg.
I've never heard a scream like that before. It was just an awful, horrified type of scream.
Everyone remembers the video of her screaming, why? And she got a lot of flack for it.
Let's all try and remember what it might be like to be in her situation, doing your thing, your craft at work. Somebody ambushes you out of nowhere, and you're gonna come up with the perfect thing to say? Nah, that ain't fair. That's not fair.
Ann Schatz was in Detroit covering the championships when the clubbing went down. She was a sports reporter for Coin TV in Portland and had gotten to know Tonya pretty well.
And I called her at her hotel in Detroit after the news of Kerrigan's attack happened. And she said, yes, I've been sleeping, what happened? I told her. She said, oh my God, I've got to get Eckhart. This could happen to me.
But the FBI later revealed that it was all an act because Tonya called Jeff back in Portland to tell him the good news.
They did?
With Nancy severely bruised and unable to skate in the US Championships the next day, Tonya skates well enough to become the national champion.
Even though the clubbing forced Nancy to withdraw from the event, she and Tonya were both selected for the 1994 Olympic team. The Olympics were just a few weeks away, and no one knew whether Nancy was going to recover in time to compete.
The police nor the public know who brutally clubbed Nancy Kerrigan, but Tonya's supposed death threat at the regional event left many people suspicious, and they contact the feds with tips.
Jeff Galuli flies to Detroit to be there with Tonya. But by that point, the FBI, the Portland police, and the Detroit police have all been hearing whispers that maybe they were involved, and they interview the two of them separately.
Nancy Kerrigan.
At first, they stay united and deny knowing anything. 4 days later, Tonya and Jeff fly back to Portland and are met by their new bodyguard, Sean Eckert.
What happened to Nancy Kerrigan?
It's horrible, and our prayers with her and her family, and I just hope she recovers soon.
When I see him walking her through the airport days later, coming back from Detroit, I'm just thinking to myself, what on earth is going on here? Who is this guy?
Did you have anything to do with this assault, Tonya?
Let's go, come on.
In the days following, Nancy appears on the cover of magazines, and TV crews camp outside both skaters' homes.
When Tonya was skating at Clackamas, right after she got back from Detroit, when she had public skating sessions, this is when folks from around the world were starting to come in.
It was a circus in this town, believe me. It was ridiculous.
Security.
This was a media spectacle like no one had ever seen, especially in Portland. Here you've got the pretty Disney princess on ice, and then on the other side you've got the cigarette-smoking tomboy from a trailer park in Portland. They were just like good versus evil, and the media had a field day with it, and the American public couldn't get enough of it.
And I will prove to everyone that I am number one.
The whole thing quickly unraveled as Eckhart began to tell everybody and their brother what was going on in various statements that were made here, there, and everywhere.
A 5-year-old would have known, keep it quiet, and he never could.
It was Mr. Eckhart who made it so much easier to solve the crime because, of course, he was talking. And as I recall, his father was talking as well.
Even Sean Eckert's father, who'd overheard some of the conversations, couldn't keep his mouth shut.
I've got a bad feeling about this that doesn't go away. I mean, 24/7.
He was talking to a woman he never met, having phone sex with her, and telling her details about his son's involvement.
Do you know about the Nancy Kerrigan incident?
Nobody knows for sure, but many people believe that this woman who'd been having phone sex with Sean Eckert's dad is the one who spilled the beans. They think that she's the one who sent the letters to the FBI and also to reporter Ann Schatz, implicating everybody, including Tonya.
Hello? Listen, we got a letter down here that impacts you and Jeff. You're gonna want to take a look.
It was shocking, it was bizarre, but you're also thinking, what if? What if any of this, even a smidgen of it, was true? Because the smallest of it linked Tonya.
Tonya Harding gives an exclusive to Ann Schatz and flatly denies any involvement in the attack.
And that's when her world changed, Kerrigan's world changed. The Olympics were going to be a spectacle like nothing else. With that answer, no, I did not have anything to do with the attack. But at some point, the loose lips were going to sink that ship.
It took just 8 days for Stant, Smith, and Eckert to confess everything they knew.
Yes.
Including Jeff and Tanya's role in the whole thing.
They assumed she was involved. They had some basis to believe she was involved, but almost all of their dealings had been through Galuli, so they really didn't have a lot of direct evidence against her.
Less than 2 weeks later, Jeff Galuli cracks. He admits to his part in gathering the hitmen and coming up with the plan.
Yes.
Even Jeff Galuli couldn't handle the heat. And he tells the FBI that Tonya was in on the whole thing from the very beginning. But without any more evidence, the FBI can't make an arrest.
She was never going to give up. If she'd been convicted, then she would have been banned from the Olympics.
I had no prior knowledge of the planned assault on Nancy Kerrigan.
Finally, in a press conference on January 27th, Tonya tells the world that she knew nothing about the attack until afterward.
Well, she admitted a crime when she was talking about how she had been involved in a cover-up, essentially.
Without proof of anything more, the U.S. Olympic Committee can't stop Tonya from competing. Then, Less than a month after the attack, Jeff Galuli pleads guilty to racketeering in exchange for a 2-year sentence. By now, all of Tonya's henchmen have been charged. So all Tonya can do is keep her head down and train amidst all this media scrutiny.
In Boston, Nancy Kerrigan is tirelessly rehabilitating her landing leg. No one yet knows if she'll be ready in time for the Winter Games.
Pretty upset and angry that someone would do this, and I really want to skate today, but...
If Tonya can make it through the next couple weeks without being charged with anything or any more evidence coming forward, she'll be free to compete in the Lillehammer Olympics that are happening the next month.
But on January 31st, Portland restaurant owner Kathy Peterson sifts through trash that's been illegally dumped on her property. It has happened before, and Kathy is intent on finding the culprit.
On this particular day, and I opened up the first bag of trash, and going through it looking for an envelope or a name or something. And so what I found in the garbage was a commuter ticket out of Detroit. I found an envelope with all this doodling with a Tony Kent Arena, things that pertain to Nancy Kerrigan's practice schedule, and a Skaters Association check receipt made out to Tonya Harding. So having that information, I knew that it was associated with them and kind of just went from there.
It was as though the skies had opened up and a ray of sunshine had come down and lighted up our case. The likelihood of that happening was 1 in a million.
The envelope was turned over to the FBI, and they had a handwriting expert analyze it.
The side that has Tony Kent Arena on it, that's the side with Tonya's writing. However, in the upper portion, I recall very distinctly 3 entries that had to do with dollar figures, and those were all written by Jeff Galuli. Interestingly, the dollar figures all totaled up to the same amount of money that was paid to the individuals who went out and hit Nancy Kerrigan on the knee. The results of my laboratory examination conclusively convinced me that Tonya Harding did write, in my expert opinion, Tony Kent Arena and other information to include phone numbers, etc., that appeared on one side of the envelope.
She was caught red-handed in being involved in securing the location of the first attempt on Kerrigan at the practice arena, and she was caught red-handed in having sought the times. And when you added that together with the testimony of the woman she called to secure the name of the arena, and when you added that together with the phone calls, that was compelling circumstantial evidence of her involvement in the conspiracy.
The U.S. Olympic Committee initiates proceedings to disqualify Tonya from the Olympic team, and she threatens to sue for millions. Tonya was not on the Olympic team when the assault occurred, and she has not yet been charged with any wrongdoing.
In the end, the Olympic Committee had no choice but to let her skate.
The 1994 Winter Olympics in Lillehammer, Norway have begun, and Nancy Kerrigan has been cleared by her doctors to compete. The WAC was a failure.
It had the desired effect of taking her out of the immediate competition, but it did not have the desired effect of taking her out of the Olympics.
During an Olympic practice session, Tonya and Nancy share the ice for the first time since the assault. Hundreds of reporters cram into Lillehammer's press corps in anticipation.
Everybody was talking about Tonya and Nancy. What did she know? When did she know it? What did she sign off on? Those are the questions that are just swirling. The tickets were getting scalped for prices that were ridiculous. It was the talk of the games. And it didn't matter where you were or what event you were watching, the conversation would always circle back to the upcoming showdown between good versus evil.
Everybody waiting to see what was going to actually happen, both of them on the ice at the same time. Goodness, that could be trouble right there.
Talk about tension on the ice. I don't know what we thought was going to happen, but they didn't speak, they didn't interact, but you could cut through the tension with a knife.
Later, more than 40 million Americans tune in for the ladies' free skate competition.
This was the moment that Tonya Harding had been waiting for. Respect and money and a gold medal, they're all on the line, and it's all dependent on this one performance. But the problem is, she was starting to unravel.
Tonya's bootlace breaks immediately before her program, and while trying to fix it, she's nearly disqualified for arriving late to the ice.
Sometimes that happens with ice skates. You know, you have to lace them so tight that it could happen. It could have been not a good pair of, or an old pair of laces. It's hard to say. You know, it could have been really an honest mistake, but, you know, kind of part of the drama.
Then, just seconds into the routine, Tonya misses a jump and she blames it on a broken lace. You could tell that she was starting to crack under the pressure. It's kind of interesting. There are two iconic moments from this whole thing. There's the Nancy holding her knee and crying, why? And then there's the footage of Tonya putting her shoelace on the judge's table and crying, why, basically. You have two girls who are crying, and this is what this entire thing is all about.
Tonya Harding has replaced her broken lace and is given a second attempt at the free skate that could put her back in America's good graces.
It was obvious when Tonya took the ice for a second time, she was still rattled over that whole lace incident. And her first big jump was supposed to be a triple Axel, and she turned it into a single. And then it was crystal clear to everybody watching. This wasn't a gold medal performance. She wasn't gonna win. Everything was lost.
You know it by just looking at her face. And I don't know if for a split second she also knows life as she knew it is over.
By the end of the competition, Nancy Kerrigan wins the silver medal, and Tonya Harding places 8th.
Her athletic ability was really unparalleled in many ways. And it's just such a shame that it ended this way for everyone involved. It's just such a tragedy.
If that moment was bad on the ice, just think of what was waiting for her back in the United States.
To avoid possible jail time, less than a month after the Olympics, Tonya pleads guilty to conspiring to hinder prosecution of the attackers.
We had a lot of good evidence against Tonya Harding, suggesting her involvement in the planning of the crime, certainly her condoning the commission of the crime, her cover-up of what she knew after the crime. That doesn't make it airtight, though.
There's no video or audio of Tonya plotting to hurt Nancy, and her co-conspirators are less than credible. The handwriting analysis and phone records would be cross-examined in court. This all works in Tonya's favor. But to avoid a long, expensive public battle, she agrees to a plea deal. Her sentence, 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and a $160,000 fine.
Tonya also got a lifetime ban from every major skating organization. She couldn't skate, she couldn't coach, she couldn't have anything to do with the sport, which was worse than anything the courts could have done.
I think folks thought that the plea bargain was an admission of guilt. I also think that by this time, months after the attack, folks were so tired of hearing about this nonsense. Folks were way past the saturation point of caring anymore, that they just wanted it to be done. I think a lot of people were saying, enough, just let this go away.
The reason we thought the plea agreement was a good solution to the case was, one, we were sure she was guilty and she needed to pay a penalty. On the other hand, if we'd had a trial, this trial would have consumed resources from our office, all surpassing, the ultimate importance of the crime compared to the type of things we do that far fewer people were interested in the media. Really what it came down to was we were going to settle the case if she didn't have to go to prison. And we felt that that price was worth it. And I believe that the community here that would have had to foot the bill for the trial felt it was too.
By the age of 23, Tonya had lost everything that she'd ever worked for. But instead of trying to rehabilitate her image, she just sunk lower.
A few short months after the Olympics, an illicit sex tape is released of Tonya and her ex-husband, Jeff Galuli, allegedly on their wedding night. Penthouse magazine pays Tonya $200,000 plus royalties.
That breaks my heart. For her, can you imagine? Can you imagine being in a place where you're thinking, yeah, sure. For the right price, yeah, sure. No.
Tonya didn't waste time trying to find something new. She tried wrestling, but that didn't work. So then she formed this band called the Golden Blades. And in their one and only performance at a music festival, they were booed off the stage and they never performed again.
Tonya takes a role in the 1996 low-budget thriller Breakaway. One reviewer noted Harding's acting leaves much to be desired. At a celebrity boxing match in 2002, she fights Paula Jones, who achieved notoriety as the result of a scandal involving President Bill Clinton.
Tonya's victory against Paula Jones must have given her a shot in the arm because she decided to become an actual real-life boxer.
Tonya continues to do well despite constant boos from the crowds.
Again, that is something where only she could possibly understand what would lead her down that road. And right away you think, well, money. I can't imagine that Tonya Harding wanted to get into a ring and risk getting her face popped and her nose broken and her jaw split.
In 2004, Tonya cancels a boxing match due to receiving an alleged death threat and quits the sport later that year.
She was rough and tumble. She was tough, wrong side of the tracks, nothing given to her. But the boxing thing? No.
After his 1995 release from prison, Tonya's husband, Jeff Galuli, changed his name to Jeff Stone. But that still didn't change who he was, and he had a lot of legal problems after that.
Jeff Galuli is arrested twice for assaulting his second wife and caught driving with a suspended license. Jeff is currently on his third marriage.
Tonya has seemed to embrace her rough tabloid persona and even appeared for several seasons on True TV's America's Dumbest.
Today, Tonya is back in her hometown of Portland, Oregon. She is married and has a son. Tonya is currently shopping a film on her life and is in talks to participate in a reality show.
If Tonya could have gotten Nancy out of her mind in 1994 and just focused on skating, she probably would have placed. She probably would have come home with a medal. And on top of it all, she would be doing speaking engagements, and she would be able to coach in the sport that she loves. But that's all gone because of one little hit to the knee.
What you hope for is that she's got really good people surrounding her, not folks who want something or expect something. That's what you hope for.